come back for the second. India have won the test match. India have won the series. They're going to get back for two. India at home. Lords goes wild.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the 81 All Out podcast. Rather sober mood today, given all that's happened over the last 24 hours. I'm Sidvi here, Siddhartha Vaidyanathan, joined by the regular crew, Mahesh at Cornered, Ashoka at AB Van, and Kartikeya at Cricketing View. Hi guys, welcome.
Hi Sid.
Hi, yeah, so quite a strange and sad couple of days. First, with the cricketing world losing Rod Marsh, one of the great wicket keepers in cricket, an Australian great. And then, quite shockingly, I mean, Rod Marsh was ailing and he was suffering for a while, and he's also, gone through a lot of ups and downs in his health. But just not too long after that, quite shockingly, we heard about the untimely death of Shane Warne, absolute legend of the game and arguably the best leg spinner to have played the game. And for us, I mean, at least for me, I belonging to the generation that watched cricket through the 90s, 2000s, 90s being the formative decade for me. I mean, Shane Warne's loss seems extremely personal. He's, just to have been around when Shane Warne was bowling was a sight in itself. I mean, it was a privilege, an absolute privilege to just be sitting around and watching a game where Shane Warne is just bowling, nothing much is happening, but you felt so invested in it because you knew that, the kind of bowler that he was, it was just a matter of time before something got going. And even when the times when he didn't get wickets, times when he was not bowling as well as he was capable of, there was still an excitement and frisson around that period. So we're here primarily to talk about Shane Warne. Of course, absolutely no disrespect to Rod Marsh or anyone else, but I feel we should dedicate an episode to Shane Warne. Guys, we can start off with initial reactions. I mean, I basically woke up, just checking my phone, and I had a message from, of course, Cricinfo's Osman Samiuddin. And I was like, what? I mean, surely he's joking. I mean, there's no way anything like this can even remotely happen. I mean, Warne dying is not even in my sphere of imagination, right? I mean, that's how distant things are, however weird that sounds. But I'm like, what? And then going to Twitter and then seeing all these people posting, and it's been a day now. It's been 24 hours since I heard the news, but I still can't believe that this has happened. And I don't know, how is it for you guys? Ashoka?
Yeah, same disbelief. I too was in a very rare 2 hours. I was not on the internet, and I came back and I saw this happening. People you admire, respect, like, love, you never want them to go away. And it's always a shock, irrespective of their age or their condition. But I think 52 is a bit cruel. I mean, this is shocking and, completely unexpected. I was shocked a bit. So my later reconciliation today, as I sit through and watch all the news, see the videos and all that, is I've been a little bit lucky when it comes to Shane Warne. I've caught most of his career watching it either live when he comes to India or on TV. So I've been one of the few lucky ones, and therefore this hits a little bit more harder than it should. It feels like, as you said, a little bit personal. So that I think is what I'm feeling right now.
I mean, it's so strange, right? I mean, you obviously none of us can claim to have known Shane Warne at a personal level and all. I mean, if you're a teammate, if you're a family member, I mean, that kind of grief is totally different. But I think, as cricketers, especially, when you watch a cricketer for 6 hours at a stretch over 5 days, and then over a series, and then over 15 years, there is a deep intimacy that you develop over them, especially if they are as great a cricketer as Shane Warne. There is something. There is. You feel like they are very much part of your life.
Yes, because you are a passive watcher of the game, and you watch the player, and especially a player like Shane Warne, use all his cricketing intelligence when he bowls and when he bats and captains, and the connection is between his cricketing intelligence and your passive watching. So you kind of feel that you have gotten a window or an insight into the workings of the man, and that kind of familiarity is that is the one that gives you kind of an intimacy with the player, and that's why the grief when such players go away.
Yeah, I mean, like all of you, I'm still in a state of shock, in a state of disbelief. In fact, when the news of Rod Marsh came, strangely, I was thinking, I think we were doing one of the podcasts when the news of Abdul Qadir passing away came along as well. And I saw some people react. In fact, I saw Sidvi reacting. Like, Sidvi was absolutely shocked. And honestly, I had not seen Abdul Qadir bowl live. I mean, I vaguely remember seeing some sort of pictures, but I didn't really follow his career. And then I saw people reacting to Rod Marsh. Then I was like, it means a lot to all these people. I know these cricketers as these great cricketers, great cricketing personalities. They meant a lot to the cricketing world and so on. But personally, I couldn't kind of share their level of intensity of feelings. And then I was thinking, what would happen if one of the people that we grew up watching, had to pass away like this? And just as I was thinking, the same night, in the morning, I was thinking about this. The same night this news came along, and it was just completely unreal. And like I tweeted as well, I was my son was doing some show and tell sort of program in school, and he kind of showed Shane Warne's statue to all his friends, and it just happened 2 days back. And he's been in a sort of not just Shane Warne trip. He's been in a trip of all these legends of cricket, and he keeps asking all these questions. So first thing, I couldn't believe it, and second thing I was thinking is, what am I going to tell him tomorrow morning? And I was holding back. In fact, I wasn't sure if I should even tell him, because for him, even if I tell him Bradman doesn't exist anymore, even that he finds it hard to reconcile to. Why is he not alive anymore? I want to see him bat and so on. I had to tell him Malcolm Marshall passed away quite young, and he couldn't digest that as well. So, and I had to explain why he passed away, what are the complications and so on. So I was not sure if I'll tell him or not. And then we were watching the match, and it was all over the place on TV. So I had to tell him. So I think that was my second thought, and I'm still in a state of shock. And it is like you mentioned, it is. He was all over. If cricket was all over our life, then so was Warne. It feels deeply personal. I mean, the fact that there's a massive war going on in the world, and that affects me deeply, right? I mean, it affects you at a more fundamental level, saying, where are we heading? What if there's a nuclear war and so on? Even in the midst of such tragedy going on in the world, a loss of a cricketer feels so deeply personal, and that's how deeply influential he was to anybody who cared about cricket.
Yeah, and I think at some level, it's also like when a cricketer you have watched at a formative stage goes away, it's also a part of you that's going away, right? It's a part of your growing up that has gone away. And you yourself start feeling your own, that, okay, is my time, when is my time going to come? I mean, it's those sort of feelings creep in. I mean, it's the same with Rod Marsh, right? I mean, I was emailing with our one of our guests on the show, Mike Coward, who had come recently, and I just sent him an email and said, it's deeply shocking, and I'm sure that for you it means so much more, because he had he had covered Australian cricket at that time. He knew all those players. I mean, Rod Marsh was a great friend of his, and then he was talking about how his first cricket assignment or series that he covered was the 72 series, the famous Ashes series where Ian Chappell was the captain. And they went to England and they drew the series. And he said, it's now coming up on 50 years of 72, but we have already lost four people from that team. And, it's the celebrations we are planning are it's almost like the celebrations are being taken away from us by all these departures. So, yeah, I mean, I think when a cricketer who you have followed so closely goes away. I think there is a certain deep sadness there. Kartikeya?
Well, life is precarious. And we have we have when it comes to strangers and when it comes to people who are not our family and people whose lives are not of immediate consequence to ours. We have this whole large arena of entertainment, which is basically a consequence-free zone, where we can view all these events as part of the world of entertainment. Even things like wars and bombings and the misfortune of others. In a sense, partly it is our defense mechanism, and partly it is just it's just too much to comprehend. But sometimes some things happen which sort of intrude into they break that wall of and sort of intrude into life, because it's hard to imagine something more consequential than this. I mean, there is a finality to this. I mean, in cricket we have this Walt Disney version of this, which is called retirement. But this is the real thing. He is really gone. And that's I don't think we can explain it. I don't think we can make sense of it, but it's just true. And so it's I mean, and it's I mean, look at all the things that have happened this year, and all, in recent years, like Dean Jones, the news about Dean Jones, even long time back, the news about Malcolm Marshall. I still remember the newspaper report. We don't remember many newspaper reports, but I still remember the newspaper report which came out, which explained Marshall was really ill, and he was basically, there was no cure for that illness at the time, and it was expected, but even then it was a very young age for him to go. But this is uncertain and to a large extent unknown, no? Because even the official news reports are saying quote unquote suspected heart attack. So we did, all you hope for is that he didn't suffer much, I suppose. Or what else is there to be said?
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up Malcolm Marshall. I think, at least as far as I've seen in terms of, the groundswell of grief that has surrounded this one thing is taking me back to Malcolm Marshall. Of course, we had the tragic case of Philip Hughes, which brought on such shock and sort of grief around the world. But in terms of players post-career, I mean, I'm not talking about the people like Raman Lamba and Hughes who died on the field. I mean, that is a different order of grief altogether. But post-retirement, I think Malcolm Marshall really comes to mind. And even now, like if you speak to people and if you just mention Malcolm Marshall, I mean, they will of course talk about his greatness and his exploits, but that sadness that he left so early. And I think a part of that has got to do with just the amount of knowledge these players bring in to the game. I mean, even though they're not playing anymore, the very fact that you can call on them to, just coach someone or teach someone, mentor someone, or just for an idea. Like suppose tomorrow Australian cricket wants to come up with an idea for, grooming young leg spinners, or young spinners. Who's the first person that comes to mind? Shane Warne, right? I mean, the very fact that you cannot to call him anymore and say, hey, can you help us? I mean, that's a deep, deep emptiness that it leaves in a lot of people. And they just take away so much of knowledge with them and so much of cricketing.
It is where also another place where, the wall of entertainment gets broken down. No, the sheer virtuosity of one, or the virtuosity of the great artist, or the like Birju Maharaj died recently, and they show you a world which is you didn't imagine was possible. One really expanded the imagination of what was possible on a cricket field. And so that is something art and sport and science and literature and these things can do, which are sort of, which have, a more permanent significance than, the laugh you got on the weekend, when you saw a funny 5-minute quick clip of Shane Warne or whoever. I mean, look at the reaction when Dean Jones died. And the Victorians have had a really difficult couple of years. Now they've lost Dean Jones and now Shane Warne, the two greatest heroes of, Victorian cricket fans of the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, basically. They have had a really difficult time. Yeah, I mean, but Shane Warne was also a unique figure in the sense that he was still in the public eye. He was still involved with the game. He was still, giving master classes and commentary, and and he was all over the world. He was still very much, his footprint on the game was still so massive that even a generation which is of cricket fans who didn't really watch him play, like I didn't really watch him play very much in the 90s, because my family, we didn't have cable. And, the first time I really watched him was, in that Cricket Club of India, 1998, when I was like, I think, 15 or 16, something
when
like that.
Tendulkar scored that double 100, that match.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And after that, the only times I watched him really was when they played India, when Australia played India, because we didn't really get cable until 2002, 2003, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, talking about those matches, right? I mean, like you mentioned that match in Cricket Club of India against Bombay, when basically he got walloped, and Bombay won that match big, and then in the first test in Chennai, they go, and then Australia again get beaten quite big. But the thing in that Chennai test, the things that you can't see again, or you can't experience again, and you can definitely not see in maybe not even see in highlights, is that in the first innings where Sachin basically hits him for a 4, and then he gets him out, like caught at slip. I mean, caught Taylor bowled Warne. I mean, that sort of thing is just stuck in my head. I'm like, he got hammered at Bombay. Tendulkar scored a double. He's good. I mean, we know that he will get hammered again in the second innings. But that particular moment, that over that he bowls, he just gets him. So that sort of thing you had when you followed him every day, like every match.
No, and I mean, that's such a great over. If you get to watch sort of slightly extended highlights, I think all of us should check it out. I remember writing about that second innings of Sachin. And in the context, that was the first time I actually went back and rewatched that first innings. You kind of forget about it because the 155 overemphasizes Sachin's dominance in that series. But that over is as good as any over that Shane Warne is bowled. He gets him off the front foot, then he increases the pace, then he actually slows it down. And you can see all the drama between him and Mark Taylor. It was so beautifully set up. Like, I feel like even the cover drive that Sachin hit was actually an invitation for him to keep driving, right? Unfortunately, because of what happened in the second innings, all that kind of gets completely forgotten. If you see that over again, it belongs in his Hall of Fame.
And even that Calcutta test, right? I mean, I had sort of spoken to him about Laxman's 281 and that Calcutta test and all that. And in that, he said, I went for runs. I didn't do as well as should have, but I bowled well. If you see the highlights, you'll see 20 bad balls. But I bowled like 50 overs in that innings, that second innings when India followed on. So you take 20 bad balls. That means I bowled 280 good balls. No, I bowled really well. It's just that they batted so well.
The first time I truly appreciated Warne's genius was actually I mean, of course, I'd been watching all those magical balls and so on. But actually, apart from the Mike Gatting ball, I didn't really understand how that sort of ball drifts in the air, right? Like, I didn't appreciate what it means to the batsman. And in that Calcutta test, there was a dismissal of Ramesh, actually. I think probably that's the first wicket that he gets. So the ball kind of just drifts away a little bit, pitches, and then holds its line. Like, I was absolutely fascinated with that dismissal. I thought, my God, like, did I just see what I saw? Like, if you had asked me at that time, I would have probably called it the ball of the century or whatever. To me, it was that great. And, perhaps because even if you had seen him do to Gatting or Calais or Kalinin or whatever, when you see him doing it to your batsman, and particularly Ramesh being like from Tamil Nadu as well, right? Your stakes are much more heightened. And then you see him and then I'm thinking, what could he have done? Ramesh did the perfect thing. He went forward and he, tried to cover the pitch of the ball, but could not, and held his bat steady. And the ball held its line, and it was just magical. Even in one of his worst performances, if you ask anybody, they're going to say, okay, look at what he did in India. Yeah, even 2004 for that matter. I was at Chennai for his 5-wicket haul, the only 5-wicket haul he took in India. I thought he bowled quite beautifully, actually. He gets Yuvraj out, bowling wide at the crease. And there was a ball, I think his 5th wicket was Anil Kumble, if I'm not wrong. A leg spinner to a leg spinner. And that was a classical leg spinner, just, flighted up on the leg stump and Kumble, inviting Kumble to go for a big expansive drive and getting him bowled. When I close my eyes and think about it, a lot of my Warne memories are actually his bowling in India, which is seen as actually, even Sunil Gavaskar pointed out the fact that he didn't do too well in India and whatever. But actually, even in India, even in a place where he didn't do too well, he had bowled some magical balls.
Not just balls, even spells. That test before that Chennai test in Bangalore, he had a phenomenal spell going on. He gets, of course, that Laxman. He gets Laxman with the absolute beauty of a leg break. But I was at that game, and that he was just a threat throughout that match. There was no. The whole idea that if you watch that match, the whole idea of Shane Warne being bad in India is just thrown out of the window. He's like a great bowler. What are you talking about?
It's hard to think of another bowler who had a more lethal stock ball than Shane Warne, and who had so much control over his stock ball as Shane Warne. He used to spin the ball really hard and never lose his length, and he used to get drift when he wanted to, and he used to, move the ball around in his hand so that the seam was pointed in a different direction to change how much drift he got. A lot is, when, the Shane Warne, the performer, the whole, the personality of the bowler it's a really the personality of the bowler is just a symptom of, the quality of the bowling. That was not an act. That was just, he was that good. That's I think worth reflecting on how good he was. And it's worth also reflecting that when he was bowling in India, he didn't have the flipper, which he had for most of the 90s until then. And then the flipper was gone because of his injuries. But even without the flipper, he just kept finding new ways to bowl. He kept finding new ways to get wickets. He found another way to bowl a straighter one. He even started bowling the googly from time to time, very rarely. But just what he could do with the basic leg break, the range of things he could do was just extraordinary. And that's why the whole business of he's constantly at the batsman. Every ball is an event. Yeah, it's an event because he's that good. It's because the core labor of delivering the ball is performed at such a high level. Every ball, that's what makes him extraordinary. That's everything else stems from that. And that's the hardest thing about Warne to describe, because it's there all the time and it's obviously there, and there's nothing to compare it with, because there is no indifferent Shane Warne spell. There's no Shane Warne spell where he's dropping it short twice and over. And you to compare how good Warne is, you have to compare him to other leg spinners. And other leg spinners. And Shane Warne's range of speed in the 90s. American fans will appreciate the comparison. It was basically like Pedro. It was. The range. His leg break went from like 47, 48 miles per hour to like the flipper was like 65 miles per hour. That's just unfair. That range of speed is unfair. And to do that without losing his length was just extra. It's not it's not. It's really there's never going to be another leg spinner who takes 300 wickets at 23. This just never going to happen. Even Ashwin, he's had all this success, and a lot of it bowling in India, and there's a big gap between the returns he gets in India versus the returns he gets overseas because of the amount of assistance he gets. He's a finger spinner, he needs that assistance, granted, but even he is barely approaching that 300 wickets at 23, in India. And Ashwin is a phenomenal bowler, and you look at Shane Warne, and he did that everywhere in the 90s for 300 test wickets. That's not normal. There's never going to be a bowler like that. It is just, I don't even know what to put it down to. Why was he so good? Why was he, he's not someone you would associate with sort of, putting in hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of work perfecting something. His whole persona is not conducive to that. But he was that. He was that player, and that mastery was at the bottom of that excellence was at the bottom of everything with Shane Warne, and that should hopefully not be forgotten. One of the things I really hope for is, our friend Rob Moody. He should really sort of, open out his archive and publish sort of entire spells of Shane Warne, or something like that, because that would be quite spectacular viewing, I think.
Yeah, he posted even 2-3 minutes, of Warne spell. Even just seeing that, it gives you so much more than just seeing that ball, the final wicket ball. There was one Ian Bell video that he had posted. I think it goes for 2 minutes at most, but shows you and Alex Stewart video also. It shows you the 5-6 balls that came before. That itself is amazing. So if he can put up whole spells, that'll be a different level. But Karthikeya, just to extend on that, you should talk about that CCI game a bit, because given that it was the first time you were seeing him and watching him, I know you wrote about it, but you should talk a bit about it as well.
Oh, he was. It was he only bowled over the wicket. He never bowled around the wicket at that match. He didn't have the flipper anymore, and I did not know that he didn't have the flipper anymore. I only knew he had a flipper because I'd read about it. It's just like, and then in the promotional, that time they used to have these promotional things for the test matches, and they used to show this half-an-hour program, and in which they used to show, well, Shane Warne has done this, that, Steve Waugh has done this, that, these are the big superstars who are coming, so on and so forth, back in the day. And they used to show Warne bowling a flipper, and he never bowled a flipper. And all the Bombay batsmen, and CCI is not a big ground, and the Bombay batsmen were just like, they were out for his blood. They just, Amit Pagnis and everybody from 1 to 9, like all Samir, I think even Samir Dighe played that game. And Sulakshat Kulkarni played that game, or am I confusing it with the 2001 game now? No. Anyway, all of them went after him. There's lofted cover drives against the spin, and they were just taking a lot of chances, and the chances were coming off. And that can happen sometimes. But it was also that, there wasn't that much bowling at the other end. If you remember, McGrath didn't come on that tour, Gillespie didn't come on that tour. I think Pete Blocker Wilson was their new ball bowler. Blocker Wilson, Adam Dale, and I think Kasparowicz. And Rifle, yeah. Yeah.
And maybe even Fleming. I don't know if Fleming came on that tour. Maybe.
I don't know if he played the tests.
May not have, yeah.
But I know he came in 2001, but I don't think he came in 98 for the test. But, it was just one of those days where, they kept taking chances and the chances kept coming off. And at that time, I didn't think that. At that time, I said, this guy's crap. This is overrated, blonde leg spinner, doesn't understand. This is the real, That was what you were brought up in. Like spin bowling is like our thing. It's like, it's just that was how we were supposed to think about it. And it's like, oh yeah, he's coming and we're going to destroy him. And that day it actually came off and they did destroy him. But I was always struck by the fact that Shane Warne never, ever, ever complained. Nowadays you have so much of, even great players of today, they say, oh, look at the conditions in which you're beating us. Come to our place and look, we'll deal with you in our conditions. That sort of thing is all there. Subtext is always there. With Shane Warne, that was never there. He never complained. He bowled like 53 overs a match in those 6 tests in 98 and 2001 combined. That's a huge amount of bowling for only 20 wickets. And he went for over 1,000 runs in that time. And that's just a huge chunk of bowling where, it's and you have to sort of also understand that up until that series, Shane Warne had done the impossible in Test cricket. He was a leg spinner who was playing half his Test matches in Australia, and he had taken 300 wickets at 23 apiece. That's like you cannot find a more difficult combination of things in cricket of skill, conditions, and returns. And now, like he came to India, and suddenly the impossible was happening to him. And when you think about it now, like his reaction to that was like really champion reaction. There's no other way of putting it.
Yeah, I really, in retrospect, wish Shane Warne that Australia had a tour to India between 94 and 96, basically when he had that injury. That was like absolute peak Warne, when he was basically just taking everyone for a ride. England, it started with Sri Lanka, but I think that phase would have been fascinating to watch the Indian batsman against him. And I think his record, he could have probably had a dream series in India had he come, say, in 95 or something. He was bowling. I remember some of those games. You used to watch them early in the morning in India, those games in Australia. And of course, as the game goes on in Australia, you have like all these big, these tiny islands that start forming around the pitch, right? It's all almost like, there's these little archipelagos that form over there. And then Warne pitches it on the rough and starts getting help and all. But even on day one, even when none of that was there, even on hard pitches, pitches like the Waka and things where, he would get that bounce. He was phenomenal. He was like taking teams. He was taking out teams on day one of Test matches.
Yeah, and South Africa as well, right? Like, for instance, recently when Ashwin was bowling in South Africa, I was thinking about this thing. Poor guy, not getting any help from the wicket. Like Katie pointed out, he's a great bowler, and he's not getting much from the conditions. And that's all he could do, right? He did a good job of bowling in those conditions. And then you think back to what Shane Warne did, and he did it over like 3 series, and he averaged 25 in those conditions. And in different sort of, there was a 400 chase which South Africa started off well, and then he comes out and takes 5 wickets, and he's done that against England, of course. And England is a thing that keeps coming back, but he also did well against Pakistan, right? In Sharjah he did well. Even in Pakistan, while it's not as attractive as it is in Sharjah, he still did well. In Sri Lanka he did well. So this whole, partly I didn't fully buy into this Indian disdain for Shane Warne. I was always fascinated by him, even at the early stage. In fact, I was really looking forward to, there was a massive hype about Shane Warne coming down for the one-off test, right? The Border Gavaskar Trophy, the first one, which was, I think, Sachin's debut as a captain as well. And I think he couldn't make it for some reason, and Peter McIntyre comes in.
No?
Yeah, in 96. Peter McIntyre comes in as a leg spinner.
And, that was probably when he had that injury and surgery.
Yeah, correct. And then 98, of course, with sort of massive hype, and Ian Chappell called it the battle of the century or whatever. There was, crazy hype around it. And we still, heard about Shane Warne bringing in, like a Hindu reported that he's going to bring his baked beans from Australia because That is the first time I came to know of what is a baked beans, actually. I don't think we even had internet at that time. So I assumed baked beans to be something else. In fact, the first thing that I had when I went to Australia was baked beans, to figure out what it is. And, you always saw him as this exotic sort of, I remember vaguely watching some of his spells against India in the 92 series. But otherwise, nothing against India. And he's conquered all over the world. So I was really, curious to see what he'll do in India. So this whole disdain for Shane Warne is something that I don't understand, given he's done. If you don't, as a land of spinners, if you don't respect Shane Warne, then I don't see which other sort of country should respect Shane Warne. So that's one thing. The other thing about the other narrative about Warne, especially outside of India, is this: he revived the lost art of leg spin. For someone who started following cricket right at the beginning of his career, and also we had Mushtaq Ahmed and Paul Strang and all kinds of leg spinners around that time, around Shane Warne's time, and it's not because of Shane Warne; it was just a coincidence. And perhaps
you had Abdul Qadir just before that.
Just before that, Abdul Qadir, right? So for me, I didn't really care too much for the fact that he revived some lost art. Even Anil Kumble, for that matter, right? He was a leg spinner, although you didn't think of it that way at that time. So for me, Shane Warne was fascinating even without all these sort of constructs. I can understand why, like an Aussie, like someone like Gideon Haigh, living through barren times, seeing Shane Warne finds it as a sort of cathartic release. But for me, I saw Shane Warne as the first point of my leg spin introduction. When I first tried to bowl leg spin, I wanted to bowl like leg spin, bowl like Shane Warne. In fact, that was the only logical choice you had. Even now, it is the most easily imitatable action, right? It is so simple, so economical. And throughout his career, even if you look at the sort of bowling action changes, it's not too much. It's marginal sort of tweaks here and there. And then, like 2004, when he came to Sri Lanka, that Murali Shane Warne series, where both of them were kind of trying to outdo each other, was just breathtaking to watch. So the man's range is so vast, so wide, and so beautiful to watch. In a way, I think Katie pointed it out in his blog that I feel like had we not lived in the India of that time, which had this sort of nationalistic drive against any spinners of any sort of reputation from anywhere in the world, I think we would have appreciated him a lot more. That's probably one of my regrets. I wish I wasn't surrounded by that prejudice against him in India.
I don't know where you guys getting this disdain from, because I lived in constant terror of Shane Warne, because I've seen him bowl against English people, South Africans, and I thought at least Sri Lankans will whack him, but he went and dominated them as well. So whenever he came to India, and for me, even when he was not getting wickets and Sachin and later Laxman kind of played him well, he was actually a cause of concern as an hardcore Indian fan, because we know the quality, right? And we know what he could do. At least I could, because I thought a wicket was always coming. And later, by post-rationalization, since all this observing bowlers and control metrics and all that, I kind of now realize that he was, at least 90-80% of the time, he was in control. He knew what he was doing. And it took exceptional risk as a batsman to hit him out of his length, and you can't hit him out of his length even then. You have to keep taking risks, and that's what I think Sachin and VVS did, and credit to them. But it's not something that even most international batsmen could do. He was phenomenal. He was out of the world, and I always felt dread when I was watching Shane Warne against India. I knew that something was going to happen, and we were going to lose a wicket or two, because it always used to happen when I was a neutral and I saw him bowl against South Africa or England or Pakistan. Pakistan not so much, but Sri Lanka, he used to dominate them, and I thought, this is genuinely scary bowler.
Shane Warne was he had sort of almost two distinct careers, until the end of 97, his first 300 odd wickets, 290 something wickets, came at, he went for 2.3 and over in those 60 odd test matches. the last 80 tests where he got 400 plus wickets, he was getting more than 5 wickets per match in the last 80 tests. He went for 2.9 and over. So he, in a sense, he became a far more attacking bowler in those later tests, and that may be because he had better bowling and more runs to play with and all that. But and also because he sort of may have lost like his his wicket taking weapons, so to speak. The sort of the flipper and the flipper, which used to really frighten batsmen into playing other balls in ways that they would not normally play. But that sort of, he's not just one great bowler. I think Shane Warne in so many ways is two great leg spinners, who are completely different types of bowlers to what I mean. And this you can also observe, this type of thing you can also observe in Anil Kumble's career, where the Kumble of the 90s is one type of bowler and the Kumble of the 2000s is a completely different type of bowler, where that sort of continuous, it's not continuous, but it's sort of that emergence of a new style of bowling, a new style of attacking is interesting. And now we can't ask Shane Warne anymore, but there must be somebody we can ask about this.
Yeah. Also, I mean, when the thing with Warne and the flipper was that he used to spin the leg break so big that the flipper was just lethal. I mean, you get a ball his flipper was like, when he used to bowl it, it was like deadly. And because you get that ball, and if you can't read it straight up, you're thinking that it's going to spin away from you, and then it just basically shoots through. And anybody who has even tried to bowl the flipper, I mean, the flipper is perhaps the most difficult ball to bowl in cricket. I mean, you're basically snapping the ball out of the back of your hand. I mean, just take a ball and try to even bowl it. Forget cricket ball. Try to bowl it with like a soft tennis ball or rubber ball. It is desperately hard.
And Warne is probably the only test cricketer with like 700 wickets that, I'll spend quite a bit of time talking about his one-day bowling as well, because he was a genuinely great one-day spinner at that time. I mean, he used to bowl in the slog overs. Like Mark Taylor used to get him to bowl in the like last 10 overs. And consistently at that, we talk a lot about the 99 World Cup semi-final and the final, but 96 World Cup semi-final itself was an exceptional sort of Warne performance. And the other thing that you don't notice with Warne, like recently I think it was for the War Man is the Shooting book cover that we were kind of looking at some pictures. And Sidney sent me a bunch of photographs. And one of them is my favorite, where Ranatunga hits a one full toss for a 6 over square leg, right? One of the iconic images of the World Cup. So I wanted to pick it for that reason. Then you notice that he's bowling the 43rd over or something. Mark Taylor still has a first slip in for him in the 43rd over when Sri Lanka is cruising along. I mean, that tells you so much. I mean, like initially I used to credit it to Mark Taylor being an aggressive captain. And then you realize, like Katie points out, the core labor is actually Shane Warne. It's because he had Shane Warne that he could actually do that. So, I mean, who can bowl in slog overs today, or today for that matter, anywhere? I can't imagine another spinner, and that too a classical spinner like him, bowling so consistently well in the slog overs with a slip to boot.
Yeah, 165 for 3, right? 160 for something, and then 170 for 3 or whatnot. He gets 3 quick wickets and game over.
Failed to chase 210 or something, no?
Yeah, 208, 200 less than 210. Yeah.
This is the West Indies
96,
match, right?
Yeah, 96.
96.
Semi-final. Yeah, but what about the 99 semi-final?
Yeah,
I mean,
that was an extraordinary performance.
I mean, what? How can you? There's just some certain level of surrealism to that game.
Yeah.
Shane Warne used to grunt when he bowled. You remember? You remember watching him bowl? That was like that was a measure of just how hard he spun the ball. He really spun the ball hard. That there aren't many people who spun the ball that hard, and he did it without losing his length. It was almost like the Shane Warne's leg break was like a fast bowler's Yorker. His he used to when he used to really let it rip and get it to start on middle and off, and then the drift would take it away often to pitch just outside leg stump and then turn to first slip, and then because of the drift it was also dip, and and it is really not easy to play at all, and he was. I mean, okay, you would have to be basically Azharuddin to play that off the pitch, and Azharuddin could do it, and he did it a lot in '98 and in the Sharjah games, and he played Azharuddin played Shane Warne a lot in the '90s, but there aren't that many players who can do that. Who wield the bat like a table tennis racket and play with just the bat.
The 99 semi-final, was that the one where he clean bowls Gibbs?
Herschel Gibbs.
God,
that is the ball of the century. Actually, that is.
And Kirsten, no?
Kirsten also, but the one to Gibbs was just out of the world, absolutely out of the world.
Yeah.
I mean, and you take the context of that game and where that match was at that point, and then to see that ball. I mean, of course, he's not bowling a ball based on what over it is, but even then, as a viewer, to just see such a ball at such a time, it's just something else, man.
Yeah, he got 3 wickets within the 15 overs, and then he comes back in after 40 overs, and then he gets Callis out.
Yeah.
So he is everywhere. I think Steve-O and Mark Taylor used him everywhere possible.
No, the thing is for us, right? I mean, just had there been no Shane and had there been no Shane Warne and had Stuart MacGill been the lead leg spinner for Australia, that itself would have been Australians would have gone quite nuts over that itself, because Stuart MacGill also was a good bowler. I mean, he was a quality bowler, and they would have probably credited him with bringing back leg spin and all that, and he would have ended up with quite a number of wickets. I mean, but the thing with Stuart MacGill was he gave you at least that one poor ball every over, if not more. That was one. And the second thing was that he didn't have the range of Warne, like we are talking about. I mean, either the speeds or just the calibration of the spin. Stuart MacGill was a big spinner of the ball, but he never had that kind of calibration of either spinning it 2 feet or spinning it few inches that Warne had. So watching MacGill, who was a good bowler, I mean, no disrespect, but told you how much greater Warne was. Like what a master Warne was.
Just the simple stroke ball, right? We go back to the same thing. I mean, it's not about the range, as in the range of things that he could do. It's just the range that his stroke ball could achieve. I mean, it gave him control, it gave him potency, it gave him consistency. And what more do you want in a spinner? And his ability to extract life out of every wicket everywhere in the world is just sheer genius. And one of the things that always fascinates me about Warne, I think Katie made a good point that he was 2 great bowlers in one. You can look at it numerically that, there's 300 wickets and then 400 wickets. And even as a type of a bowler, like the way he operated, I probably it's after the 1 year ban. In fact, I wouldn't probably call 98 as that point. I would rather look at post 2003, right? The drug ban that he had, and then he came back perhaps in Sri Lanka. To me, watching it aesthetically, the sense that I had that that stylistically he's changed his bowling style was probably that Sri Lankan series that I was talking about. And then I think we must be the only podcast talking about Shane Warne's life without mentioning about the 2005 Ashes for so long. I think we should make a token mention of that. Because
no, there are enough people mentioning that anyway. So yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So the 2004 Sri Lanka series and to some extent the 2005 Ashes series was a lot of fun to watch for me. Not so much for the fact that the underdog came back to win or whatever, because McGrath happened to step on a fucking cricket ball. But more importantly, for the fact that Warne was putting on a show. It didn't matter. See, the other thing that fascinated me about Warne was that he always had a greater calling. Right? He was a man belonging to cricket more than to Australia, right? I wouldn't even say Australian cricket. He belonged to cricket way more than to Australia as a society. And, perhaps I'm being selfish in claiming him for cricket more than Australia. But that always came across. In fact, even when he was getting hammered by Sachin, right? One of the things that I distinctly remember is, the comment about nightmare and all that. Like, that's him being generous. But that's also because he was so secure of himself that he could afford to give such flattering compliments to Sachin. And one of the things that he says, which I read in a book called Sachin Tendulkar, Masterful, and it was a great quote. It said, if Bradman was consistently superior to Sachin, I'm glad he was an Australian. So he's measuring Bradman with Sachin's benchmark. And he didn't have to do that at all. Here's a guy who's probably diminished his reputation, from a sort of historical perspective. But he was so generous in giving compliments to that guy. And that spirit always came through. And that also comes through in 2005 Ashes, right? I mean, you can say this is like, it could have been the 89 border moment, right? Like, let's just be hard-nosed and not give them an inch and whatever. Even when Australia was losing a historic series, he was there as a man for cricket. I mean, he was, of course, bowling beautifully. But he also appreciated the occasion. I don't think any other Aussie in that team would have appreciated the fact that England winning this would be historic.
I often wondered what it would be like if Shane Warne was English, and then, let's not get into the whole, the cultural stereotypes about, Shane Warne could never have been English. So obviously he could have been English, but, world cricket would have been a much more interesting place if he was, because England were not as good as Australia. And I think Shane Warne was often at his best when, his ability was made for that enormous canvas, I think this is one area where Muralitharan had a distinct advantage over Shane Warne, because, Muralitharan was a comparable bowler. But, unlike Shane Warne, Muralitharan was basically Sri Lanka's entire attack for a really long time. And, that sort of gave him scope. And you saw that scope which Shane Warne got in Australia, in England in 2005, when, as Mahesh was just saying, McGrath stepped on a ball and Gillespie was not very old by then, or not very old, but he was transitioning into the double century making batsman, and Michael Kasparowicz played a test match, and Brett Lee was by then getting hammered a little bit, and really, and what's more, England had the bowling to really push Australia into corners in that series, and that's where Shane Warne had his hands full, and he basically came within 3 runs of beating Australia on his own, beating England on his own in England. That is and by then there was also Shane Warne was also always aware of his position in the game. By 2005 he was basically the game's preeminent superstar. With all respect to Tendulkar, in England Shane Warne was the game's firstly, he was a bowler, which puts him higher than all batsmen in my book. But that's me. But that would have been interesting, I think, if Shane Warne played for sort of a mid-table side like England instead of it was just really unfair in a way that Shane Warne, Australia also had Shane Warne during that game.
That would have been terrific. One, it would have enhanced one's stature as a bowler, to think that something could be enhanced from where it is. But it is certainly likely that he would have ended up with 1,000 wickets or something. But more importantly, Shane Warne gave the absolute privilege to that great Australian team of not having a fifth bowler. And he could bowl long spells, and he was a great spinner who was effective all over the world. So that meant 2 things. That Australian team was lucky on 2 fronts. One, it had Warne at its peak in his second sort of wing, where he was much wiser and more mature and so on. And then it had Gilchrist playing at 7 without disturbing the balance of the team. Now, without Warne, they would have been forced to play an all-rounder, perhaps Andrew Simons, perhaps somebody else. And they would have had to bat Gilchrist out of his position. He had to bat at 6 rather than 7. That reduces his luxury to go hammer and tongs like the way he did. I mean, it would have handicapped Australia disproportionately more than it enhanced the weaker team, let's say mid-table team, just by moving Warne out of the picture. That would have made for a fascinating sort of rivalry or composition in world cricket at that point in time.
And also, I'd like to see Warne bowling at Steve Waugh and Ricky Ponting and Matthew Hayden especially.
Ponting, no chance. Ponting you would have got in like in no time for sure. But talking about enhancing, right? I mean, the other thing that Shane Warne did was also enhanced the reputations of so many batsmen he bowled to. I mean, there were all like fantastic batsmen. You spoke about Azharuddin, Brian Lara, Tendulkar, Laxman, Dravid. I mean, the range, right? But I think the fact that they scored against Shane Warne, they did well against Shane Warne, and they took him on. They charged down the pitch, or Laxman going after him inside out, Tendulkar going after him across the line. The fact that they were forced to try things and come up with these audacious ways of playing spin is thanks to Warne. No, I mean, thanks to how good he was. Otherwise, what? Why does you think VVS Laxman has to take such a risk against a spinner? I mean, against a normal spinner, VVS Laxman can just milk him for runs all day long. But he had to do that against Warne, even though the match was almost lost for India. He had to take that risk because that's what he felt was the best way to tackle him, and it came off. And who can forget that inning? So I think that is also like important. I mean, it's a credit to Warne that he made them play like that. The great Australian bowling attack, I mean, they played in some of the great series of all time. I mean, whether it's the 99 series in West Indies when Brian Lara played those great innings, or whether it was the 2001 series. I mean, all that came down to the fact that that attack was so good that to match them or to beat them required that superlative ability and performances.
Actually, to sort of put a heretical point, I think one of the other unsung advantages of Shane Warne playing for England instead of Australia would have been that you would have had better Lara versus Warne batters, because Lara batted at 3, and very often he didn't really survive until Warne came on, because I mean, your number 3 batsman, your openers against a top pace attack, you're going to get out cheaply very often. So even when West Indies played Australia, a lot of the time you're deprived of watching Brian Lara play against Shane Warne.
KD's dream attack is Darren Goff, Andrew Caddick, Ronnie Rani, Alan Malali, and Shane Warne.
No.
And Shane Warne. That's what I'm saying. That's your dream attack. So that Shane Warne basically can bowl 90 overs in 2 days.
It would have made for a more competitive era, no? Yeah.
First of all,
like nowadays, I think what if if New Zealand had one out of Ashwin or Jadeja, they would be so much more.
They would be dropped and they would not play. Just like Ajas. Yeah.
No, I mean, first of all, again, that's a good theme because again, like all other themes about Shane Warne, explode by Gideon Haigh about how Shane Warne keeps saying he would have loved to play in the 70s with Ian Chappell's team. But Gideon makes the argument that he would not have survived in that. He would not have even made it to the Australian team in that setup. He would have just been lost. I mean, it required he came on at a time when the Australian system was streamlining itself to find these talents. And even when they found that talent, he was thrown out of that National Cricket Academy, which was set up precisely to find talents like Shane Warne. So, but the one anecdote that I read in all these tributes, very touching, was how after he was thrown out of the National Cricket Academy, he basically wanted to, he got to know about this Terry Jenner, who had bowled for Australia and was this leg spin guru. And how the first time he met Terry Jenner, he took a crate of beer, went to Terry Jenner's house and said, "Now teach me leg spin." I found that so amazing to see this guy, whatever, 19, 20-year-old guy, just taking beer and saying, "Okay, now teach me." Oh man. So we need to talk a bit about, the West Indies bit. We've missed out quite a lot on Shane Warne against West Indies. I mean, whether it was Lara or Chanderpaul or Hooper, for instance, Carl Hooper, who he had some wonderful battles against. I mean, many of these games, they aren't available. The footage is not easily available, especially from Australia's tour to West Indies. Rob Moody has many, but not that much. But I used to really enjoy watching Shane Warne against, that West Indies team, especially the 90s team, which was still good. I mean, not as great as the 80s teams, maybe West Indies, but they were still a good team. And that 99 series remains a really, really fond memory for me. I think I stayed up so many nights watching. And in fact, even the one day contest, there used to be this, one day series in Australia back then, which West Indies used to play, tri-series and all that. Even in those matches, watching Lara and Hooper play Warne, it was a delight. I mean, Carl Hooper was a phenomenal player of spin. I mean, the way he used to use his feet and hit the spinners overhead, it was magic. Warne against South Africa, I mean, the Cullinan bit is a cliche, become total cliche, but I think he had some wonderful battles against them. I mean, Callis and a lot of their players, Kirsten too. I mean, that
even
90s.
Even AB de Villiers is bowled quite a bit against. And I mean, every time, they won a series in South Africa under Taylor, then they won it under Steve Waugh. And I mean, they had a couple of drawn series at home. I mean, he's always bowled exceptionally well against South Africa. And it's easy to kind of fall into this trap of South Africans being poor players of spin, which is actually not true, at least not not in the way that it's spoken about. But even if you're relatively poorer players of spin, to be able to get like 5 wickets a test at 25 average on those grounds in those conditions is just phenomenal, And, the Callis dismissal is, of course, widely popular. But I remember him getting a lot of these. So he attacks. I don't know. I have this sense. I mean, perhaps I'm just influenced by my memories right now. But against South Africa, I felt like he always attacked the stumps a lot more. He bowled like on the middle and leg, trying to get that sort of $1 million ball and the classical sort of left arm, sort of leg spinner's dismissal a lot more. So, like, if I just imagine all those dismissals, I can imagine like a Dave Richardson cotton bowled trying to flick. And Callis trying to drive, Hansi Kronia trying to kind of whack him out of the ground and so on. I just felt like perhaps we should check this. I don't know if KD has a way of checking this, but I just felt he bowled a lot straighter to South Africans for a good reason, perhaps.
I'll tell you. Let me see if I can check. But one of my favorite figures about Shane Warne is that he's the player he dismissed most in Test cricket was Alex Stewart. The player he dismissed second most in Test cricket was Ashwell Prince. These are like two different players from two different ends of the Test match world. Two different players from two different eras. Alex Stewart played from like the 80s. He was from that generation, and Ashwell Prince is from like the generation after Cronier. After not only after Cronier, after Donald, and he's from the Graham Smith generation. But that's also, I think, in part to do with the two different Shane Warne careers that I think exist basically. Where and that is sort of all of Shane Warne, the Shane Warne, the performer, is often sort of he's like a attention sponge, who sort of seems to direct attention away from Shane Warne, the bowler. And I think one of the things that happened to Shane Warne when he lost his flipper is that paradoxically, I think he became more attacking, because he didn't have the ability to contain anymore, because he now had to beat the batsman in the air. He had to deceive the batsman in the flight. He couldn't really, beat them off the pitch so much. Even though from time to time he did develop the straighter one. I mean, there's one brilliant dismissal of Sanath Jayasuriya where, he gets he bowls a perfectly normal, what appears to be a perfectly normal flighted leg break. And it lands on middle and off stump to Sanath Jayasuriya. And Jayasuriya tries to play it with the spin. but it dips on him and goes on straight. And basically Jayasurya's outside edge is beaten, and it takes his off bail. It's a phenomenal dismissal, because Jayasurya is completely beaten in the air in that dismissal, and then to make matters worse, he's also beaten off the pitch because it doesn't turn and he expects it to turn. And that is a that's quite a remarkable capacity, for a bowler to have. But the other thing about Shane Warne, I think, was also that I don't think I remember ever Shane Warne bowling negative. I don't think I remember him ever bowling to not dismiss somebody. And this is, I think, particularly interesting because that was an era in which the whole idea of the restrictive spinner was actually a thing. Nowadays we don't see that, but in that period there was such a thing called the restrictive spin bowler. There were spin bowlers who were basically there, like Giles, for instance, who were basically there to keep the runs down and contribute a few runs of their own and try and survive. And because that was an era where there were so teams were scoring so many runs, and the restrictive spinner was a thing. And especially since Australia never really played five bowlers, I think the fact that Shane Warne stayed an attacking bowler was, extremely important for Australia, because if they played only four bowlers and then Shane Warne would also had sort of lapsed into this defensive holding role, it would have left too much to do for the other bowlers. But he never did, and he was phenomenal. And it meant that, okay, Kevin Peterson or somebody occasionally will take him apart and take him to the cleaners. But in the long run, it still meant that he came out ahead. No?
Yeah, and also, talking about attacking, I remember this match really distinctively. This his 100th Test match against South Africa and Cape Town. This was in 2002, and back then I used to end up watching a lot of games from South Africa, and that was probably a time when I was off or something in the day. So this match needs to be like, I want the whole match to be uploaded by someone or to be able to watch it at some point, because basically, if you see the scorecard, South Africa scored 239 in the first innings. Mainly getting out to, a combination of Australian bowling, and then Australia make 382. But South Africa in the second innings make 473 runs in 162 overs, going at nearly 3 and over. Okay. Glenn McGrath bowls 25 overs, Gillespie bowls 29 overs, and Brett Lee bowls 22 overs. Shane Warne bowls 70 overs. He bowls 70 overs in that innings. He gets 6 wickets for 161. Now, 70 overs, 6 wickets for 161, you'll be like, oh, okay. The kind of thing you have in your head is like, okay, they scored 400 something. Maybe they were going after him this time. But that was an extremely attacking, through the time, he was attacking all the time. I don't remember him at any point getting restrictive, drying up the runs, as they say. He was trying to get a wicket every time. And thankfully, much later, I read an interview of Shane Warne where he picked this as one of his best performances. And I was glad, because, it tells you that Shane Warne wasn't just about, Shane Warne had magic balls, but he also had the phenomenally tireless spells. He would go on and try and get a wicket through that time. Every time he bowled, it was to get a wicket. So I hope at some point of time, I can just see this whole innings spread out, through a whole day or two and watch it. And Australia, of course, went on to win that game. And Shane Warne even had a good game with the bat in that test, because he scored a 50 in the first innings and really helped them. So yeah, that was Shane Warne. There was a certain indefatigability of that word about him.
You can see that through his commentary also, right? Like, if you leave him, if it is legal to do so, he will just jump out of the commentary box and just go start bowling and start keeping field placements. He can't imagine a game which does not involve him, or it does not involve his way of thinking. And his way of thinking is the quickest path to 20 wickets. And that was just that simple. Unfortunately, the skill gap between Shane Warne and not Shane Warne is so vast that you can sense the frustration that comes through commentary. So you can always see him putting himself in the field when he commentates, and you can see that he's mentally setting this up, and he's mentally going through how he will take those 20 wickets. And
no, also when teams are like have scored 400, one team would have got all out for 150, but Shane Warne will be like, if they can get them all out in the next 30 overs, then they can then chase 400. I mean, he'll be coming up with these absurd scenarios, but the fact is that he has played like that and won games. So for him, it's like possible. But for normal people, it is all gone. The match is over, boss. Thank you.
I mean, that's what happened in the Adelaide Test, right? In his final series, the Ashes series. They had no business winning that match. It was like a daylight robbery, right? He robbed the match out of England's grasp, which was heading to a comfortable draw. And it was like, I think he got 4 wickets. It was not even one of his 5-wicket hauls. But it's like, I don't think anybody but one could have done that. And it's partly his character, his way of thinking about the game, and majorly his skills as a bowler. And in fact, the 70-over spell that he talked about, if I'm not wrong, Gideon Haigh also talks about it in the book on Warne. In fact, he doesn't get into too much details about great spells. But to the extent that he mentions some spells in detail, it's a couple of these spells which are these long, epic marathon spells without much reward, which someone like Dennis Lillee, for instance, is remembered for bowling those long spells. But if you look at someone like Dale Steyn, for instance, right? Like even when Sehwag hit him for those big 100 in Chennai, like if you look at the number of the overs that he bowled, it's not a lot. Whereas Shane Warne, like he never flinched away from bowling those ugly, sort of tiring overs. And even when he knew he was not going to get much purchase, like it is very easy for him to have kind of not bowled enough in the India series in 2001, for instance, when he knew the match was going to be a long, tiring sort of effort. But he never flinched away from it. And that's something that tells two things about Warne, which is grossly underrated. One, his cricketing fitness. At the end of the day, that determines fitness way more than any other sort of parameter. And two, one of the points that Kerry mentioned earlier, I was surprised that he said it, is that he didn't, like, his personality seemed like all of that came naturally to him, but nothing comes naturally in life. So, I firmly believe that he practiced a lot. He put in a lot of hard sort of hours at practice. In fact, initially, even during his, being kicked out of the academy days, I'm pretty sure he worked extremely hard on his bowling, and he kept bowling overs after overs after overs. That stock ball is something that doesn't come naturally. That stock ball is a product of all those hours figuring out how to master the stock ball, right? And subsequently, the way he's reinvented himself is also come about by sheer sort of practice. There's absolutely no doubt about it. I think both of them are grossly underestimated about one.
It's also that, that stock ball mastery, you see it with Ashwin also, that basic mastery of length and drift and, how much the ball is turning. Those basics, there's mastery is such, and Shane Warne was also like that they could almost think with the bowling, that they could think with their bowling. They could, it's one thing to say, okay, now I'm going to bowl this one, and I'm going to try and turn it hard from leg stump. And the next one, I'm going to turn it a little bit less, but I'm going to sort of start it out a little bit outside off and get it off stump, get it to pitch on off stump. But it's another thing to actually do it. And Shane Warne could do it. And, once you sort of I think what happens is that once you get into the habit of doing it, then you sort of get better at doing it. And to your point about bowling straight, so against India, for instance, Shane Warne got 30% of his wickets bowled or LBW. Whereas against South Africa, he got 39% of his wickets bowled or LBW. But, the best returns for him in that are against Pakistan, where he got 42% of his wickets bowled or LBW.
Yeah, that's not surprising. Actually, he did bowl more aggressive sort of line against Pakistan as well. At least, without all these extended highlights, they're all going by our biased memory. But that's
and just to add to the point of intuition, right? Like when we all know that cricketers practice their craft for hours so that it becomes muscle memory for them to react, because in match conditions, you don't have time to react either as a batsman or a bowler. Once you release the ball, it's done. So to release the ball at that pace and in that direction, and expected to do certain things requires a lot of practice, and that becomes your second nature. I think there is another level to this where only rarefied people go, which is a kind of a intuition which even surpasses the muscle memory, which is you get some kind of a premonition as to you will do a certain thing and there will be a certain reaction to it, right? You hear people say Tendulkar kind of anticipated what the bowler did much ahead, and he got into positions which other batsmen couldn't, and this was based on your previous deliveries and whatnot. Now that sounds like basic anticipation, but for a bowler to you have that clip where he walks through how he's going to dismiss Brendan McCullum, right, in the charity match or some T20 match. I think that goes beyond muscle memory. I think there is some kind of intuition that he develops over so many balls, like 50,000 balls he has bowled, right, internationally. You kind of get a data set where these are the events that have preceded, and therefore the most likely set of events are these. And for these events to happen, I have to engineer it in certain way. And it looks like intuition for a lay person like me. Like he has somehow divined what the batsman is going to do. But for him, it might be simply just, memory of things that has happened before in such a situation. And to engineer that, and even if you have memory, it is not easy to engineer such events, right? Because a lot of factors can go wrong. Your balls can, you can over pitch, you can bowl it short, or the batsman will not react to the way that you want him to react. But for a lot of things to go right and for him to be vindicated most amount of times, that shows kind of I don't know how to call it other than a premonition. I mean, that may be a poor word, but that's what I would say.
No, you're right. I mean, in fact, Glenn McGrath once made that same point about Warne. He said, now Glenn McGrath has like a phenomenal memory. Like he can tell you every wicket that he took. If you say wicket number 10, he'll tell you which wicket, how he took it. So that he has. But he used to say, Warne cannot tell you that, but he feels it. He sort of, if he has a batsman in front of him, and who's batting in a certain way, he feels that there is a way in which he has already dismissed such a batsman before in such a situation, and that he can do it again. And that is like deep immersion in your craft, right? I mean, that's what, a musician who is composing will have, because then they are drawing upon parts of their brain that they don't even know they have access to. Or a great writer, for instance, who is, writing so instinctively because of all the millions of words they've written before, and it all comes together, meshes. So yeah, I mean, that is, I think, what we would call genius and premonition and all that. But in effect, it's what you are saying. It's intuition. Yeah.
But it'll be great if we can somehow, have some more video evidence for this, or someone to demystify this. That will be a good insight into how these people thought of cricket at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a very important quote that comes to mind, with Greg Chappell said about Dhoni. He said he's an old soul, and by that he meant that he feels that he has experienced a few of these things before. And so he's able to react to that in the thing. He might not have experienced it, but he has the feeling of experiencing it. So I think, there are some cricketers, for whom a lot of it is, it's there. Because, and that is not, by the way, that is not just some God-given gift or something. It is there because they have put in the work to get there. They have actually worked so hard to be in that position. Yeah.
One of the things that I was thinking about while we were talking is that we started talking on such a sort of sober note, saying it's such a tragic event and a part of our lives have been taken away and so on. But in the process of talking about Warne, there's so much joy that automatically comes through. Like all of a sudden, this conversation is a very lively, happy conversation about great cricketing moments. So yeah, like it's like the answer to getting over this grief lies in Shane Warne himself again. We got to go back to him to get over him.
I wanted to say this before, but anyways, I'll share it now, because I think the hack to immortality, I think, unless science and technology catches up, with it and figures out how we'll not die ever is, I think, through art and sport. You just keep that's your cheat code to immortality, right? Like, as long as people remember the things that you do, you're never going out of anybody's memory, and to everybody else other than you, you're just a memory, right? The things that you do, the things that you have said, and those are the things that keep you alive. And in that way, I think artists and athletes, they have cracked immortality better than most other kind of people. So that is the kind of rationality that I give to myself when I hear like a Shane Warne passing away, or a Lata Mangeshkar, or an SPB, whose work I am has been a great source of calmness. It has brought calmness and happiness and joy, and acted as consolation in times of in during bad times. So that's kind of the rationalization that I always do, saying that I have not probably lost them. The person I don't know personally, I don't know Shane Warne or any of these people, but their work is so intimate to me that it's like they never left, and that's kind of a consolation that I tell myself.
That's true. I mean, the first thing I thought of when I heard the news was, here's this cricketer who has spread so much joy all around the world. I mean, just watching Shane Warne play cricket, is such a pure act of joy. I mean, you gain so much pleasure and appreciation, and you fall in love with the game more and more with players like this. I would in fact attribute a huge part of my falling in love with the game to players like Shane Warne, or Wasim Akram, or Sachin. I mean, there is. It's not just about watching cricket, right? It's watching cricket in that elevated space of players who are able to do this. I mean, you can watch cricket in your neighborhood park tomorrow, but and it will give you a certain level of joy, no doubt, and it will be calming and relaxing, and there is a great pleasure in watching that. But to then see this at a level that is so exalted, that really, makes you understand the variety and the dimensionality of the game. And I would say Shane Warne has a massive role for me to play, just to love the game. For me to love the game, write about the game, talk about it, all that might not have happened if not for players like that.
Well, it's the greatest marketing for the game, right? If a new person who's not into cricket sees this, that's a drug. What more do you need? There is nobody.
Peter Della Penna has posted about it also. Peter Della Penna, who is ESPN Cricinfo's USA correspondent, in 2005 he was in Australia for study abroad. In many of the US universities, you have a chance to go and study abroad in a university for 1 year. And that was a time when the 2005 Ashes was going on, and he watched it from Australia, which means that he would have watched it, at a time zone that was not necessarily convenient. But he had no idea about cricket. He goes here, he sees this Ashes, he falls deeply in love with Shane Warne. He comes back to the US, to Nebraska, which is pretty much the middle of nowhere in cricketing terms, and he joins a club that was started there where expats are playing cricket there. He gets into cricket, he starts watching cricket, and then now he actually reports on cricket. He's been reporting on cricket and USA cricket. He's like the authority on USA cricket today. So, here, that's all thanks to Shane Warne. 90% thanks to Shane Warne. So it just tells you the effect, right, of one bowler. And look at, now Peter Della Penna's writing and reporting is going to have an influence on so many people. So it's magnificent.
The thing about great masters is that even people who are not really that much interested in sort of the details of the mastering, they know, they at least at some level they recognize it. They, even if you don't understand like Western classical music, and most of us, we are not really students of it, but you listen to Elgar or somebody like that, and you see, oh yeah, there's something here.
Yeah, if you want, there's no better way to market cricket to new pastures. I mean, if you want to get Americans to fall in love with the game, or Chinese people to fall in love with the game, just take a bowler like Shane Warne. There, I mean, they will see the mastery. I mean, they don't need to understand cricket to see the mastery of the player, of the cricketer. Yeah, I mean, the other point, of course, that Gideon has explored in detail in the book is about the fact that television and Warne, right? I mean, that he played in an era of when television was really kicking in, production was getting better, commentary was getting better. So viewers could appreciate Warne, far more than they would have been able to appreciate Beno, or any other spinner of that time. I mean, now, of course, things have gone to a higher level with HD and other things. But even then, the coincidence was godsend for viewers more than Warne. I mean, Warne would have been Warne in whenever he played. But for us to understand Warne, it was great.
No, so I was realizing this again, because my son keeps asking questions. So he's always curious about who's the greatest, who's the second greatest, and so on. So with Bradman, I have some names, and with Marshall, I have some names and whatever. With Warne, I didn't have any names. He asked me who's the second greatest leg spinner. I didn't have any names, and I said, who was the second greatest when he was playing? I said probably Anil Kumble. And in another instance, he said second greatest leg spinner Anil Kumble. I said no, he's not the second greatest leg spinner. So then he asked me, then who? Then I was like, my wife was also poking me, saying, can't you just come up with a name? Is it that difficult? I said, yeah, it is indeed that difficult. I'll have to go to Bill O'Reilly or Grimmett or probably Subhash Gupta. That's how far you got to go back, which is not true in any other discipline, right? Okay, Malcolm Marshall moves on, then you'll probably there's always a McGrath to compare him to. It's not
or a Stein.
Or Stein later, or Cummins and Bumrah when they finish and whatever. There's always, each generation produces someone who's close to that level to at least warrant a comparison. Same with batting, right? Like with Bradman, of course, he's in a different league. But even with Bradman, you can argue that with more playgrounds and more grounds, more opposition and whatever. There's always been a comparison with Sobers, with Sachin and so on. Or more formats and so on. You can neutralize a lot of things. But with Warne, I struggle to come up with an answer. And that's when I realized that, for all this glorification of leg spin, cricket has actually not been blessed with too many great leg spinners. And Warne is so rare, so precious, precisely because of that reason.
I would say...
What do you have against...
not a bad answer.
Sorry?
But he said leg spinner.
Muralidharan is not a bad answer.
No, leg spinner, specifically leg spinner.
Yeah, but he's
Muralidharan is a wrist spinner.
Yeah,
he's a wrist spinner.
No, I told him Murali is the greatest off spinner and Shane Warne is the greatest leg spinner. So in his mind, these are two different things. But they are different things, right? You can't compare.
No, but Kartikeya, here is like the exception to your kind of argument, right? Like every generation will eventually be greater than the previous. Like in certain disciplines like leg spin, that may not be the case, right?
Yeah,
it's an exception to the rule, is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Well, yeah, there are players who are unique. There hasn't been another Gary Sobers since.
Yeah.
Yes, so that's the point that Sibi. I remember you made this to Ian Chappell when we had him on the podcast. That bowlers have found a way to come back, and it's been a bit of a bowling era in the last 3-4 years, which is an undisputable sort of fact. Or is it indisputable? Whatever. So, but Chappell's counter is this, right? He immediately starts talking about leg spin. So his idea of a great bowling era also includes place for a great leg spinner or a great spinner, and that's a whole different perspective. So, and you got to give it to him, right? We don't have that right now.
Yeah, and he has always made the point that the game is the strongest when you have great leg spinners and great swing bowlers, because he believes they are the most, they are the bowlers who make the batsman take the most risks. And so the game is constantly moving along and the game is moving ahead. So yeah, and that's a point he has stood by for 40, 50 years now. So
Yasir is not even making the 11 right now. So
talking about leg spin and wrist spin, I mean, I was extremely excited when Kuldeep came onto the scene. I mean, that one.
I still am. I think Kuldeep's still a much better bowler than people think.
So, it's a tragedy that Afghanistan don't get to play as many tests, or else Rashid Khan would have been at least a good contender.
No, but it's also
He
Rashid
should play
Khan
for
is
England.
like exactly. If Rashid Khan
It
plays
would
for
be
some other
interesting if
team,
Rashid Khan would bowl for England.
KD, what every good bowler you want to play for England now? What is this new?
No.
His mid-table, no.
His idea of a mid-table team is England. He thinks mid-table is like England.
We don't want this podcast to become like all other podcasts. We will have reviews and other things coming up where you can argue about mid-table teams and who should play for England. But I think we've covered quite a bit on this sobering kind of day. But again, as we said, a lively discussion thanks to the subject we were talking about. Shane Warne, only one Shane Warne. As ever, you can subscribe, like, comment. We'd love your feedback. We have, you can review and rate the podcast. But as of today, I would tell you to, if you haven't read it, please read Gideon Hayes on One. Buy it. Buy it, multiple copies if you want. Gift it to people. It's an absolute masterpiece written on a true, legend of the game. And it covers so much about his cricket and his mastery that I would urge every one of you to read it. Probably nobody gets Warne and his craft and his effect and mastery as much as Gideon does. So he's been a guest on our podcast talking about On One. So I'll link our previous podcast with him. But, just reading those words on a page will give you a lot of pleasure.
India have won the test match. India have won the series. They're going to get back for two. India home. Lords goes wild.